J.D. Vance's tirade at the Munich Security Conference was designed to provoke, and provoke it did. His argument that the greatest threat to Europe is not Russia, not China, but a so-called threat from within, a supposed retreat from fundamental values like free speech, drew applause from the populist right and scorn from European leaders like Schulz. But while his argument is appealing in its simplicity, it is wrong. Not because free speech isn't under pressure, it certainly is, but because he entirely misdiagnoses the cause. Vance's central claim that Europe is sliding into authoritarianism through restrictions on free speech rests on a handful of dubious examples: a man fined for praying near an abortion clinic, the cancellation of an election in Romania, and restrictions on hate speech enforcement are cobbled together as though proof of a systemic erosion of liberty. It ignores the context. The abortion clinic buffer zones exist to protect women from harassment. The right to pray does not extend to a right to intimidate. And somebody who is praying may not necessarily be praying. Romania's election cancellation was based on concerns of foreign interference and election manipulation, not a Brussels-led coup against democracy. And hate speech laws in Germany are a direct product of historical necessity, protections designed to prevent the resurgence of fascism, not a tool of censorship. Vance's rhetoric also skates over the more immediate issue that Russia, which is not a hypothetical but an active aggressor on European soil, presents a serious threat. And while the US Vice President scolds Europe for cancelling elections, Russia is literally invading sovereign nations. The false equivalence is staggering. But I say again, free speech is being targeted and is being eroded. And that's where things get interesting. Vance is, despite himself, onto something. There's a real issue with free speech, but not the one he thinks. Free speech is not being curtailed by some insidious progressive conspiracy. It's being threatened by the simple reality that power, whether in the hands of government, corporations or activist groups, seeks to entrench itself. And thanks to modern technology, the tools to do so are more readily available than ever. Governments are tempted by digital censorship, be it in the name of misinformation control or national security. Social media platforms, in an effort to avoid regulatory wrath, routinely overreact, overcorrect, ban content in an opaque and unaccountable fashion that cannot be challenged. Activist groups from all sides use online outrage as a weapon, turning social pressure into a tool of de facto censorship. Vance blames the erosion of free speech on the left, but the reality is far less ideological. It's a feature of power itself. The means of control are there, and so they are used by whoever has access to them. And the real question is not whether free speech is under threat. It is. The real question is how we defend it in a way that is consistent with democratic values. This means rejecting false equivalence. European democracies policing hate speech, that's not the same thing as Russian authoritarianism and Russian aggression. Demanding transparency from both governments and tech companies if speech. That is an essential prerequisite, but if speech is to be moderated, the rules need to be clearer, consistent, and subject to democratic oversight. But by whom? Because whoever ultimately has that oversight has control, and so therefore has the opportunity to censor and diminish free speech. Recognizing that free speech is not an absolute right, but a principle to be balanced, that again is something which is important. America has this obsession with free speech, but even in America it is curtailed. The right to express an opinion does not extend to the right to cause harm, and the challenge is to draw that line wisely and clearly. Vance's speech was an ideological broadside against Europe, not a genuine engagement with the complexities of free speech. It was also a brilliant speech, or rather it was brilliantly delivered. Vance is one of the great orators, I think, of the modern age, up there with Nigel Farage. But like Nigel Farage, his content is questionable. And the content of this speech, I looked into it the other day, whoever his speechwriters are need a serious shaking up, because the speech itself is riddled with logical fallacy. He is right that a problem exists, but entirely wrong in explaining why. Free speech is being constrained, but not by woke elites or Brussels bureaucrats. It's being constrained by the eternal desire of power to protect power, to protect itself. The challenge is not to turn this into another left versus right culture war skirmish, but to ensure that free speech protection is robust, transparent, and democratic. Anything less is just political theatre. And from that point of view, J.D. Vance put on quite the show.